Hi everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to host that session. I see some familiar face. Thank you. A couple of months ago, when I started thinking and proposed that talk, I was thinking about a lot of topics about this digital sovereignty, because there are so many ways to approach it. And since we have a lot of articles, a lot of publication, a lot of talks about it at the Open Source Summit in Amsterdam and so on. So I was checking about how I will say everything I want to say. So I choose to take a high-level approach of it. Also because I saw that there is a lot of newcomers here at the LF Energy Summit, a lot of new GTs, and maybe it was a good thing to get back of, you know, what is open source and what is behind that. So it will be a pretty high-level presentation, but it will echo of what Tim has presented before, and you will see there will be some link on it, and I will try to keep the time too, because it's very tight. So maybe first of all, for those who doesn't know me, I'm Christophe Villemer. I'm the Executive Vice President of Savoir-faire Linux. It's a French-Canadian company doing services in open source for 25 years. We do embedded software mainly, and we help companies building their open source journey. I have the pleasure to be and honor to be a member of the LF Energy Governing Board, and I thank the general member to have elected me to that position. As you saw this morning, for those who were at the presentation, we are very much involved in the SEAPATH project, and personally, it's more than 20 years that I'm working with open source. So, first of all, why, talking about sovereignty, and why now? We see that you see the news, it's everywhere. So it's not a big deal, geopolitical fragmentation. Our supply chain, your supply chain, are vulnerable now, and for sure the energy infrastructure, are targeted. So it's a question of national security to keep the resilience of the grid, and we need to protect the energy system. And there is also a growing concern about, the purchase of the technology and the technologies, who own the technologies, who sell the technologies, and how you manage that. So a lot of organizations rely today with outside technology that we have no control on it. So as I said, there was a lot of presentation recently on the subject, and you will have the link on the slide, but I just wanted to maybe point out a couple of it. The first one was published by LF Linux Foundation Research with LF Europe. A very interesting, and we see some figures because it's small there, but about that at the end. Open source has a strategic advantage for Europe. This is a very interesting report and analysis. But the best one is, and I thank Alex, because actually I could have canceled my talk because everything is on this wonderful paper on Enlit Europe. You will have the link. Everything is there. That's why I decided not to get that approach, but to take another one. So maybe we could start by what is the definition, of digital sovereignty, because I'm sure that everyone gets a way to approach it, and I think it was maybe interesting to look at it. First of all, we can find some formal definition. Organizations like the EU, Linux Foundation bring their own definition of it, and that the part of that what guide where we goes. Maybe I wanted to say what is not, because we see that sovereignty is an ambiguous word, and it's now used a lot in a lot of countries. So the digital sovereignty is not about isolation. And it's not about rebuilding from scratch the technology. It's really about control and having not a full independence. It's really that, you know, it's really having the power of make a strategic tech choice for your organization and your roadmap. And focusing, for me, you know, focusing on autonomy, collaboration, and that's the core of open source. So maybe I dare trying to get, you know, a common definition of digital sovereignty, which 4 pillars that will be, first of all, of course, having the autonomy of your infrastructure, you know, control of your system. Then the data, you need to own the data. Data sovereignty is key. Ownership of the data. Of course, you need to have the authority to make your decision, to make your policy, your rules, and at the end, having a dependency resilience in order to minimize the external single point of failure. So for me, that will be the 4 pillars of what could be the digital sovereignty. And if we apply that to the energy sector, we said, you know, why the energy sector is a risk. Most of you are from the energy sector. I'm an IT guy. I'm just discovering OT and energy sector for 6 years now, but you know that much better than me. But you are, you have, you know, like a vendor locking very strong on the legacy system. You rely on proprietary system. You don't have control, transparency of that, black box system, and that's why you need to get rid of it. Also, there is a slow evolution, of course, of the journey of the innovation, and sometimes a lack of flexibility. And because we're talking about risk, about outside risk, cybersecurity, is really important because there is an increase of the threats on all the system, and as soon as you bring new software, you bring the threats are much bigger because the surface attacks are bigger. So there is a lot of risk, and I took some example that actually have to give credit to Alex because they were on his paper, but some example about what can put you or the customer, the user at risk. You know, you can have the bankruptcy of a company that owns the technology, and then what you do with the technology, there is no way to take back away that technology. You can have a company that decided to abandon or cancel a line of product, and you are stuck with that. You also have, you know, the famous, you know, Broadcom buying VMware and licenses cost issue, which I would admit is a good opportunity for SEAPATH to get on the market, for sure. And also, you can have political decision, you know, that makes that we don't want to have such a company coming from such a country to come. Whatever, there is an example there, but there could be, we could have a lot of other examples. So when you see that, we see that, you know, we see open source as a really strategic enabler of getting back into a digital sovereignty, because open source is really giving you transparency and trust. It's obvious to say that the code is fully visible, but transparency and trust of open source is key. It's also give you the modularity, the adaptability of the software you are developing. And it's bringing you an ecosystem which needs to be sustainable and which will be supported by a broad community. So we need to see open source, and you need to see open source as a strategic enabler. And that's why, you know, the LF Energy is really a key framework for making work the digital sovereignty and making work the project. Linux Foundation overall, it's a wonderful framework around that. So what it gives you neutral IP zone, which is key on the fact that you are working together on some project and make sure that the intellectual property of the code which is developed will be resilient whatever happens to the contributors. It brings also best practice for bringing security, DevOps, with a link of also other links with other projects or foundation of the Linux Foundation, like the OpenSSF, which is interesting. All the process that the LF Energy makes on organizing security audits on the project that are hosted by the LF Energy is really important. At the end, it really accelerates the innovation and the deployment of the solution. So that was, 3 years ago, probably one of the key messages of Lucian Balea from RTE, that the fact that the idea of the LF Energy was really to speed up innovation, because alone you can't achieve all the challenge that you have. So inside the LF Energy, we could have, I wanted to have a spotlight on the SEAPATH project. I won't go into the detail of the SEAPATH project. There was a couple of presentations on it this morning. SEAPATH is at the core, at the node of the grid, so it will be key for the resilience of the grid in the future. But SEAPATH today, after 5 years and a half of existence, it's really demonstrates how open source was able to meet industrial grade expectation. And it is now actively used and with a growing and developed with a growing community of utilities, of software company, and also vendors around it. So, and it gives also to the market a real vendor neutral with a diverse business model solution. That means that there was some question for those who were there this morning for the talk from National Grid, RTE, and Allender about SEAPATH. There is always this question about the business model, but the case that SEAPATH is a core layer that is common to the ecosystem. And then you have multiple companies that will come with their business model. Savoir-faire Linux will do some support on it. RTE International, that they will have a lecture tomorrow, they will also work on it. The vendors, GE, Schneider, ABB, they all will have their flavors. And it's good because the market needs diversity. So, and Red Hat, the newcomer in the market that will want to take part of the long-term support of SEAPATH. That means that we'll have competition, but then user will have choice. There is also another project, very important maybe for the future, I want to point out, is the GESA project, the Grid Edge Interoperability and Security Alliance. For those who could be interested, it's at 4 this afternoon. Michael Stuber for Southern California Edison is doing a presentation about that. The idea is to give really a software-defined architecture for the next generation of the smart meter, and it's actually aligned on all that strategy. And that strategy and what is maybe sometimes counterintuitive to understand about open source is really the power of the competition, is making people, competitors around the table to work on the same project, and also users. And I know that even if utilities were very used to collaborate on research and development or standardization and so on, they were not that much used to work on software and this gives a space of working for that, on working around that. So open source is really, sharing the innovation layer that can be, I would say the most common part of the software, which allow you to differentiate on it and to add your best add value. So it doesn't reduce the add value of the vendor or everybody. You just have a common layer where everybody works in and you have the freedom to differentiate on it. And for sure, it increases the resilience and the efficiency of the software and the stack that are developed. So if I want maybe to just summarize some part and have some lessons and giving some next steps for the future and maybe answering some question about when you said on the talk before that, you know, there is always a question about the upper layer of the organization, you know. We need to have a strategy for that, and maybe I will give you some answers because we see that it's always often come by the technical part, but when it came to the strategic decision or political, they are a bit frightened. So maybe it's a way to give some strategic and political argument to convince them. So if I want to resume, you know, sovereignty, we need to see that as a governance. It's more than technology. It's a way to work together. So it requires strong governance, clear policy, and leadership to ensure the control of what we do. But it implies also for the ecosystem an open procurement models. And that's always a question. It has been raised on the precedent talk, how you procure, how you buy, how you sell open source. Aurélien Ouattara from RT International will have a talk about that tomorrow. And that's very important because it's a change for utilities too. You know, utilities were used to buy hardware for 20 years, and now you will have to buy software that will change every day, almost. So there is a mix, but if there is no open procurement model, you know, it won't work. And for that, I want to probably thank you. You know, RT brought a strong leadership of the LF Energy, but on the SEAPATH project, the fact that RT asked a public tender on the fact that they want to use open source with SEAPATH and ask the market, that means the vendors, to force them to use SEAPATH to propose them, they have an impact on the vendors that now needs to make sure that their protection runs on SEAPATH. So the open procurement model is important because it can drive the market, but it's essential even internally to change the way everything is working, and it's not easy. It's not easy because there is legal issue, there is, you know, liability. Who will be accountable for that when you have open source? But you know, sometimes we ask questions, but we already have the answers. You know, if you take, maybe it's not the best example because Boeing get in trouble, and Boeing is a very strong company involved in open source. But if you take a plane today, there is a lot of open source in a plane. You know, if the plane crash, that's Boeing who take the responsibility of what happens. It's not all the stack which inside the. So that's the same for utilities. When a vendor will sell a utility, the software, even if there is open source software, that the vendor who needs to take the accountability for it, and the market will need to make support on the open source. And we need the ecosystem needs a strategic participation. That's the core of what the LF Energy is making. You know, all the stakeholders, you know, utilities, vendors, tech company like us. We are SMB, but we are taking part of this participation at the same, you know, level as big players and utilities. And open source allow you to do that, not being only a consumer, but being an actor, and it's really important. And this is why the LF energy is really important. Because adopting open source, cannot be improvised. It's a strategy, and you need to follow a path. And the first one, and one of the most important one, is you need to establish an OSPO, because it will build the framework internally that will allow you to grow. Then, once you have got the OSPO, you will be able to, implement your governance of your code internally, of the way you will work. And then, sometimes you already have contributors on your company and you don't know, but then you will have active contributors, but they will be framed into your internal policy. And the last stage is really, being engaged in communities. I mean, contributing, collaborating, and being able to influence upstream the project. And that's where you go from being a consumer to an actor. And that's the part of if you went this morning to the Sanders presentation from Allender, at the end, he said on his slide, who needs to take responsibility? And it's a discussion I had often with him. I had at the lunch with him. He said, but it's a question of, sometimes utilities or people expect a product, but it's a project. It's an open source project. So if you want a product, you just buy a black box. If you want but the project is being able to evolve also with your needs, And if SEAPATH today is as strong as it is, it's because GE and National Grid, on their presentation, decided to upstream all the project, all the optimization of that. So, because, and my friends of GE are not there, so I can't say it. I know it's recorded, but probably it was not, GE's first idea to upstream it. But because it's a funding from National Grid, from the UK, they force it to be open source. And so GE decided to do it. And so as GE did not know how to do it, they engaged ourselves to do it. So there's like a chain. But then everybody of the community, benefit of the very strong advancement of the which was made on the National Grid project. It's the same with the project made by RTE, the same by the project made by Allender and by others. All this contribution around the project make it evolve. And just to finish, that it's some figures from the report of the LF research that I was pointing at the beginning, and it's really what you said this earlier. And curiously, because we see that sometimes that I'm living in Canada, and sometimes we see Europe very much advanced in open source, but then these figures show that globally, finally, Europe is still behind on the open source adoption, and there is a very strong technical contributors, developers. I think we think that there is probably 6 million developers in Europe, only 4 in North America. But so there is a strong capabilities. But then, as soon as we get on the political side and the strategic side, there are some stopover on that. One figures I like, well, no, I don't like, but I want to point out is probably, the dedicated contributors. We see that 28% of the companies, have open source contributors. Even if 81% of the companies say, oh yeah, there is a lot of advantage to the open source. But then they need to go to the strategic level. And this one, to echo the presentation or the question just before was only 62% of executives recognize the value of OSS, of the open source software. And a large amount of employees does that. So just to conclude, if I see the open source journey that will brings to an open digital sovereignty, is that we will need you to contribute, because you need to get engaged on that. LF Energy Summit, for those who are not yet member, is a perfect ecosystem for that. And try to convince the management. There is a lot of argument for that, even political now, because we know that bringing the digital sovereignty will help every organization. So we count on you, and I thank you, and I kept the time. And if there is a question, the time that my successors came, I'm ready for you.
Thank you. So just one remark. I think there is one thing which is not mentioned, but it is also important. We can put it under the reliability of the open source. This is the availability of the open source. Today, in Europe, we are wondering what will happen if sometime a data center in US will be blocked or cut, and then the open source code will not be available anymore. And so this is something we need also to mention, to be sure that the open source is still available, even if data centers are going down.
Yes, that's a very good point. Is it a comment or a question?
It's more a comment, and I will be interested if you have an answer to this comment.
No, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer that came out of my mind, but for sure we rely a lot of GitHub. Which is a product owned by Microsoft today. So for sure, we need a collective, effort to see if we could have some, trusted forge that where we could have the code. I know that some governments, some companies, outside take the code and keep the code in Forge, but then it's not up to date. But that's probably a very good question. On the legal part, we know that that's the reason why the Linux Foundation opened the Linux Foundation Europe, because every project in the Linux Foundation gets an IP, and you correct me if I'm wrong, have an IP that is registered in California, but then thanks to LF Europe, you're able to move the IP to Europe. It doesn't change anything on the other part, but then you have an IP that is hosted in Europe. That's was part of the strategy of building LF Europe.
Thank you.
Just to rebound on that.
Yes.
The fact that Git is used, not necessarily GitHub, but Git is used everywhere as an open source, as a tool for coordinating open source development. Doesn't that give it some inherent resilience? But even if the server gets cut, everybody's working on a local copy, you can at least, you can have the nuisance, but not the blocking capability. Once you start doing open source, nobody can block you anymore, at least from the perspective of getting the copy. Maybe not the latest copy, maybe not the most wonderful copy. But is GitLab hosted in Europe? I don't know. It's maybe a granted or a stupid question, but is there, or does anybody know on that? Or you, if you know? I don't know. You can self-host the GitLab, of course. Yeah, but in the many labs in France, they do host GitLab. But there's, I think, anyways, I think it's a